They told me to shut up because I was ugly. I never imagined that the most humiliating day of my life would begin with a compliment. "That color looks nice on you, Melissa." I looked up from my desk and nearly dropped my coffee. It was Ethan, the Ethan Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, sharp jawline, deep blue eyes that somehow always looked like they were smiling. The man every woman in our office secretly admired. The man I had secretly admired for almost 3 years. He stood beside my cubicle holding a folder. "You should wear blue more often," he said. Then he walked away. Just like that. Meanwhile, my heart was beating so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. I laughed nervously to myself. Get a grip, Melissa. A woman like me didn't attract men like Ethan. At least that's what people had spent most of my life teaching me. I was 42 years old, plus-sized, divorced, no children. And according to certain people at Parker and Wells Consulting, I was the office joke. Not because I was bad at my job. Actually, I was one of the highest performing project managers in the company. No, the problem was my appearance. At least that's what some people believed. I learned years ago that success doesn't stop cruel people from being cruel. Sometimes it makes them worse. Especially if you're a woman. Especially if you're not considered conventionally attractive. And especially if insecure people feel threatened by your competence. That morning, our department was preparing for a major staff meeting. The company was struggling. Clients were leaving. Revenue was falling. And our boss, Richard Langley, was under pressure from upper management. Everyone knew it. You could feel the tension in the building. By 10 o'clock, 30 employees crowded into the conference room. Richard stood at the front, sweating, agitated, already irritated. I sat near the middle. Ethan sat across from me. As usual, he was focused on his notes. The meeting began normally. Numbers, reports, deadlines, excuses. Then Richard asked the question, "Does anyone have ideas for reducing client loss?" The room fell silent. Nobody wanted to speak. I did. For weeks I'd been studying client feedback reports. I knew exactly where the company was failing. Slow communication, poor follow-up, outdated systems, fixable problems. I raised my hand. Richard looked annoyed immediately. "Yes, Melissa." I swallowed, then began explaining my proposal. I had barely reached my second point when someone laughed. A quiet laugh, but loud enough to hear. I ignored it. I kept talking. Then another voice interrupted. Nobody asked for a lecture. A few people chuckled. My face grew warm. Still, I continued. I had facts. Data, evidence. Richard suddenly slammed his hand onto the table. The sound echoed through the room. "Melissa," I stopped speaking. His eyes narrowed. Then he said words I'll never forget. "Would you just shut up for once?" The room froze. My stomach dropped. Richard leaned forward, looking directly at me. "You always think you're the smartest person in the room." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then he laughed. A cruel little laugh. "You know why people don't listen to you?" My heart started pounding. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Then he said it. "They don't want to spend all day staring at someone who looks like..." He paused. The room held its breath. Then he finished. The silence afterward felt endless. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't even blink. I just sat there, staring at him. The room suddenly became very small, very hot, very painful. Some employees looked away. Others stared at the table. Nobody defended me. Nobody. My eyes burned. I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Not again. Then a chair scraped loudly against the floor. Everyone turned. Ethan Carter was standing. For the first time since I'd known him. He looked furious. Not annoyed. Not frustrated. Furious. His blue eyes locked onto Richard. What did you just say? The room became even quieter. Richard laughed nervously. Oh, relax. No. Ethan's voice was cold. Repeat what you said. Richard shifted uncomfortably. It was a joke. It wasn't. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ethan stepped forward. You just humiliated one of the best employees in this company. Richard crossed his arms. Stay out of it. Ethan didn't move. No. The single word hit like a hammer. For years people had admired Ethan because of his looks. But in that moment, nobody was looking at his face. They were looking at his courage. Because he was doing something nobody else dared to do. Standing up to the boss. Richard's face reddened. You work for me. Ethan nodded slowly. Actually, Richard, his voice remained calm. Dangerously calm. After what I heard today, I don't think that's going to be true much longer. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Richard blinked. What? Then Ethan placed a thick folder onto the conference table. The folder I recognized immediately. The folder containing the client retention audit. A report upper management had been waiting months to see. A report Richard had personally controlled. A report nobody else had been allowed to review. Ethan opened it, slowly, then looked around the room. Finally, his eyes landed on me. For one brief second, and something in his expression changed. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was respect. Real respect. Then he looked back at Richard and smiled. The kind of smile that made my skin prickle. Because it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man holding a secret. A dangerous secret. And judging by the sudden fear that appeared on Richard's face, the boss already knew exactly what that secret was. To be continued in part 2.